Everybody, welcome to this week's webinar. We have got Will Koning. I suppose this webinar is all about jumping into SDR role, how to find success in that role, what traits businesses and I suppose hiring managers typically look for. The reason I've got Will in today, Will is actually working at Yoda at the moment as a senior commercial leader there. He's got around 10 years, probably if not more, in sales. But on top of that, he's actually got his own business where the bread and butter of that business was to build SaaS SDR superstars. So Will, I'll let you do your own intro. I'm sure you do a much better job than I will, but yeah, crack on.
Thanks for that introduction, Nathan. Yeah, so I'm Will. If you've been on LinkedIn at some point or other, you've probably come across some of my comments or something like that recently. But I guess what I'm particularly passionate about is taking young people and growing them into their full potential. I've trained over 250 now salespeople to become predominantly SDRs, and in that time, I guess I learned a thing or two. And yeah, currently the chief commercial officer at a company called Yoda.
Excellent. And I think a really good starting point will be, well, first and foremost, you worked in like various businesses, you've led various teams in various sectors, predominantly within tech and SaaS, most recently at least. But I suppose from your perspective, as a senior commercial leader, what for you really are the main attributes that you're looking for SDRs if you're to hire them? What is it that you're looking for?
So right now, if anyone that isn't aware, it's quite hard selling. We are in a bit of a down market, as we know. I was actually thinking about this before. What are the attributes that I look for today? And actually, nothing's really changed too much. But I think some of the attributes that really count right now are the most are so crucial that if it's just not there, I'm just not going to hire for it. Yeah. Those things very much are getting stuff done. I usually put swear words in for that one, really. But you've got to be able to just execute day in, day out, consistently. And it's not just being busy, it's doing the right work well. I need that in my team today. I'm a bit of a broken record. It is all about consistency, getting your numbers in to get the outputs out. And if you're not someone that can do that, so good quality consistent work, it's probably not going to be successful for you right now because it is so hard. The other kind of attributes that I would say for any salesperson they need to have is they need to be goal orientated, they need to be focused, they need to have their own intrinsic internal motivator that's going to get them through the hard times. They also need to be resilient, persistent, and I'm sure you've heard all of that before. The other thing that I was thinking as well is, I've probably hired, most of my SDRs have been remote, certainly at the academy that we put through. And I was thinking about that. And you've got to be really independent and you've got to be prepared to be on your own a lot. And I think that gets really missed in that junior role. I think everyone's going, oh, remote's amazing. But I sit there day in, day out, hearing about SDRs, how it's actually really impacting them in not a positive way, not obviously on social, right? But it's really hard. It's really hard to maintain all those things I've just described, and then doing that in what is probably a bedroom, if you are the typical age of an SDR. And if you aren't independent, then you're probably going to have a bad time.
Yeah. And I suppose like that, at that point there, it's a really good point, because I think from our perspective, as you know, where we've worked with you previously and hired for you, big part of our job is consulting, right? Especially for early stage founders, the reason they go to recruitment agency is actually to get that consultancy side and actually some like real good advice. And I think a lot of the time for us, obviously early stage businesses, I'm talking up to around a headcount of 10 to 15, we always say, look, really, you don't want that SDR to be remote, because there's a lot of learning to be done and actually working alongside somebody who's been there and done it, and actually even just working alongside an AE, be able to nudge them every time you need them or have a bit of advice. They're there, right? But I suppose from your perspective, has COVID really now changed the narrative in terms of when you should be hiring remote teams when it comes to SDRs, or have you always been of the mindset actually it doesn't matter as long as they've got those core attributes?
Well, I think first things first, like I see the fact that we're a remote team. Ultimately, as chief commercial officer, that's my responsibility to ensure that whoever's in the business is the right fit from an attribute perspective, but also to ensure that they have the necessary levels of support. So I think the thing that I've noticed the most is how much my role has changed as a leader. Like, I've always been a big coach in general, of course, but I would say that is now almost 70% of my role, being there to support, to guide, to, you know, to be consistently coaching them day in, day out. And if I think back to my old sales leaders, I never got any training, let alone coaching. You know, it was maybe a one-to-one every 1 or 2 or 3 weeks if you're lucky.
Yeah.
But it didn't matter. I guess it didn't matter as much because how the game has changed, you know, like people used to answer the phones, people used to reply to emails more frequently.
Yeah.
Whereas now the rules have changed. So yeah, I think it's more how much my roles change rather than the attributes of the SDR. But I guess I'm not in the SDR seat anymore, so I think it's looking at it from their perspective. I'm sure it has changed a bit as well. Yeah,
sure. No, that makes complete sense. One thing I'd say from experience in working with you in the past, you're a rare finder when it comes to in terms of our perspective as a client, because usually they get bogged down with they must have this degree, they must have a 2-1 from a top 50 uni or X amount of experience in certain sectors. I'd say you're a rare find in the sense that you're much more open to finding the raw attributes and traits of that person. Do you think that's something that's overlooked on in SaaS and tech in general? Do you think most businesses get too anal around specific experience rather than attributes of that individual?
Yeah, I like in sales, right? There's literally 3 universities in the UK that teach one module of sales. So that in itself probably says how much I think about degrees.
Yeah.
In that context,
See.
I don't really hold it against people that don't do degrees, but you know, when you think about 50% of graduates, only 50% of graduates actually work in their chosen field of study. You know, that probably indicates how I like actually how relevant and applicable the higher education system is for those that work in commercial worlds. Now, you know, I'm not talking about doctors, scientists, all these amazing AI engineers, you know, go study data science for God's sake, you know, but certainly from a sales perspective, I don't think the best salespeople I know worked in university, or that's what I would attribute their success to because they went to university. I think really it's more about the value of curiosity and how curious are they, right? Like, I know I don't have a degree, and I'd like to think I know a thing about tech, and who taught me that? Well, that was me, you know, and so I look for curiosity as a value, not what degree you've got. But in terms of has it changed? I don't know. You probably tell me more because you probably talk to more employers than I do. But I certainly found that at SaaS Leeds when I was running the academy. You know, we had that chat. Yeah, I used to get my favorite one. Actually, now you've reminded me. Is we want Oxbridge, but we want diversity. And you're like, right? Do you know what percentage of you know, black people, for example, actually go to Oxford, and then what percentage of those people go to
sales?
Yeah. It's like, right, okay, so you want me to perform the impossible. So I think it's all about managing expectations. And you know, that's what I did quite a lot. I'm sure you have to do the same.
Yeah, absolutely. No, of course. And of course, I'm just playing devil's advocate here. I'm fully aware of the troubles of clients and their needs. And to be honest, to answer your question, actually, yeah, it is slowly changing. Clients aren't as set on finding specific degrees from specific unis. It is slowly, I suppose, diluting, which is good. But there's still some clients who are absolutely set in it, and it's they get what they want in the end, but they have to wait longer. And actually, probably if I look at it, those businesses probably aren't as diverse as other businesses, which at the moment, as you know yourself, well, most people, what they're after is culture and diversity, and it's a huge topic. So I think those businesses, although it works for them now, I think there's only so long they can keep doing that until things will probably end up going skew with. But
I wouldn't necessarily say, I suppose from a sales leader's, a commercial leader's perspective as well, is obviously things like diversity is so important, but are you going to get me that number? Are you going to help me hit my revenue number? And I don't see how a degree potentially is going to help me close a deal,
No.
or more deals. All I really want to know, it's certainly now I'm looking at AEs as well. It's how are you going to hit your number?
Yeah.
That's what they're about.
Absolutely. I know you mentioned there just previously to that as well, around curiosity being such like a key trait and something that you possess and something you look for in your whoever your hires are really. Is there like one or two other traits that for you are non-negotiables when it comes to specifically the SDR hire? Because I think that's really what I want to focus in on this today to first provide value for people who are looking to get into that role. So
I think I've covered them right. So it's the focus, goal orientated, curiosity, the ability to get stuff done, the persistence, resilience piece. Are you prepared to get punched in the face? Are you prepared to get up again? And when you get punched in the face again, you're going to go again. And give me, and more to the point, everyone's going to say that in a job interview, right? It's like, hey, give me examples, right? I'm now looking for examples. I want proof.
Sure.
That's probably what I would say here. And then it's that independence, right? I think really these are probably the traits that I'm looking for today as an SDR. Most definitely, it's, can you get the job done? Because my resources are thin, as is everyone's right now. And I've got to, within all that, if I can tick all those boxes, then you have my trust, and then I'll probably hire you. Yeah.
There we go. That's rule 101 to get into Eola or Will Koning business. There we go. Excellent. I suppose you mentioned a minute ago around kind of how, we both discussed how you obviously open, it's more kind of attribute or traits of that individual that you're really interested in. From your perspective, working across various companies, have you worked for companies that are, what we've mentioned there, more set on finding those degrees? And I suppose from a management perspective, from yourself, like how hard was that to work in a business where you're a bit more creative and open to what you'd hire and really who would be the best individual, but actually a few levels above you probably making decisions for what that ideal hire looks like when actually they're quite far removed from that level of the business? Has that been a struggle you've had to go through, or have you had a bit of a bit more open leaders throughout your career?
I suppose, if you think back to SaaS Leads, where I was doing this a lot for our customers, I think there was a lot more trust put into me because of, I guess, the experience. It was a very different value proposition to perhaps what a traditional talent agency does. And I think the market was frankly incredibly different. There was many demands for SDRs and not enough supply. So I think customers were more willing to kind of negotiate on what's available because the investor pressure, etc. I think moving forward, I think in today's world, it is finding that right candidate. And I would just say to any hiring manager right now is don't be foolish, right? Like, a degree, okay, it's great. It's an indicator that someone can go and get the job done, a job done. I'm not necessarily at sales. It shouldn't be discounted, but that doesn't mean it should be kind of like, it should be seen as different from someone that doesn't have a degree. Like right now, I'm pretty sure that a lot of people would like to hire me. Because I can close deals, right? If they're hiring, I'm sure I'd at least be considered, least not to be too arrogant. No, I don't have a degree. Do we want to have a chat? Well, God, right, I've built a company and made 2-3 million quid out of that company. Do you want to have a chat? Or no, you don't. What, you're discriminating against me because I don't have a degree? Well, that's ludicrous. Don't be dumb. Give people a chance. Trust the people that are helping you, i.e. your recruiter, if that's who you've brought in, and trust them, and give people the time of day, because that's probably where you find your rawest talent, your best talent, perhaps.
Agreed. I suppose for SDRs these days, kind of looking to get into sales, or actually might even just be kind of fresh grad school leavers that don't know what they want to do. They've stumbled into sales or been told by a friend or family member around sales and SDRs, the entry level. What advice would you give to them when it comes to actually finding the right business for them? Because obviously there's various routes you can go down, right? It's like culture, products, but actually I think at the SDR level, not enough people actually really consider what's the most important thing to them. So what would you tell them? What kind of advice would you tell them to so that they can find that perfect business or role?
Yeah, well, I think I would almost take a step back, and we used to do this in mindset training with the SDRs. It's like, what do you really want?
Yeah.
You know, and then they're going to go, well, I want money. And it's like, okay, why do you want money?
Yeah.
You know, because ultimately money only gives you the freedom, but the freedom to do what? And if you can figure out that intrinsic motivator that's going to help you get out of bed on a rainy night in Ashford, which is quite a few, isn't it? Early morning. You know, you've got to know what motivates you, because ultimately, you know, your manager's job is not to say, come on, do some work. You've got to be able to self-regulate your efforts coming in. So before you even decide to get into sales, you've got to ask yourself, what do you want out of life?
Yeah.
Right. Now, it turns out what people want usually does involve a fair amount of cash, especially at the moment. So often, if that is the case, then I say, hey, yeah, get into sales. So I say, you know, if you've got that deep intrinsic motivator, go for it. If you don't, and it is just like, oh, I just want more extra cash, then your money's it's only gonna get you so far, and then you're not gonna be able to be consistent in the role, and then you're not gonna achieve your objectives, right? So I think that's the first thing.
Yeah.
When it comes to, okay, let's just say we've got there, and say, hey, I want to get into sales. Well, there's lots of different types of sales. Like, I actually like first man on the ground type sales. I like solving failing startup type sales. I like trying to, you know, I'm very sort of problem solver. I like to be very different. So I'm very much suited to very early stage startups, pre-series A. That's where I'm at. You then got your scale up, so series A to series D. That's where it's a little bit, I would say, as a salesperson, is probably where the most fun's at from what I've seen, where you get, you know, the company's got a little bit of product market fit and it's going there. And then on the other side, you know, talking to the, you know, some of the elite sellers that I know, they really do sit around sort of the series C to IPO stage. And that's where, you know, you very much are expected to do one role, one job, and do it very, very well at a very high level. So I would suppose each one of those stages has a different appetite for failure when it comes to sales. And you've got to try and figure out what kind of culture is for you that sits in with that. I know my place, which is in the scrappy, fighty place that we've got to figure out and solve a lot of problems. And probably, frankly, I know for a fact we're not making the types of, you know, $1 million numbers that perhaps, you know, senior salespeople are on the other side. And they really are choosing the money. So if you're super money orientated, you want to be aiming for those companies with great product market fit, clearly got something to sell. But you should also then be expected is your job is to sell, and your job is a number. And you are a number, and you also say, if you don't hit that number, you know what's going to happen if you don't hit that number 2 quarters in a row. And that's the deal, right? Startup world is a little bit more try and fail, or real early stage. And that's also the deal. The also deal is you don't necessarily get the opportunity to earn all the big bucks. But I know what I love, for example.
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually. And I think, like, really taking a look at the business, the stage they're at, pre-seed, seed, series A, whatever that may be, and actually the interview process, just asking around that, saying, look, day to day, I understand what that is, or maybe you don't, but I'm sure you'll get to a point where you're doing that interview process. But actually saying, aside from that, what other tasks are given to the SDRs, for example? Because if it's a 5 to 10 person employee, actually, you might be doing a bit of marketing on the side, or whatever the case may be. So I think that's a really fair point, and actually will probably help people find a business that's really for them. Because if you're very methodical and like a structure and process, day in, day out, the same sort of process to a certain extent, a 5 to 10 person employee business probably is not really a good fit, right? You're probably looking for a slightly more established business, like you said, got product market fit. Your role is very defined. So yeah, that's great advice.
Just on that, another point that's come to mind. So outside of the money orientation and what you like as a person, what you want to work in as an SDR, ultimately your goal most likely is to get promoted.
Yeah.
And you've got to kind of take your own throughout all of this. By the way, everyone should be wanting to learn that. I think that fits into curiosity.
Of course.
But you know, like I've seen a lot of SDR managers in my time, or sales leaders that look after SDRs, and you know, you want to be, I think this goes irrespective of size, you want to be looking for someone that's going to help you grow and help you develop and have a development program in there. It's almost obvious to me, but I thought I'd better mention it because I've actually worked with, like I said, I've had sales managers myself that don't do that. And if you haven't got a sales leader that has that can, wants, and has the ability to develop you, I personally, I'd run a mile from those.
100%.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And actually, I think that in itself, in finding out that the business and the product might be a great fit, but actually what you might find out is the person you're reporting into is an AE who's only just jumped into that role and been closing a month themselves. And actually that might not be the best person to learn a ton from. So yeah, I think really delving into all the specifics around that will be massively important, especially in the longevity of you in that role, because the more you can really iron the crease out in the short term, the longer term you'll stay in that business and really succeed. So that's a really good point. Sorry, go on.
One more sort of red flag is when they tell you to get promoted in 6 months to A. Yeah. Be careful of that one. That smells like BS to me. You really need to be making sure you're doing your time in the trenches. So just be careful. I'm not saying it's not impossible, but be very careful of that one. Yeah. No,
agreed. But also the impact of that, of constantly churning people into the business after 6 months, you got to think that's constant people coming to business 6 months. What is the culture like? Are you actually with a team that are settled? You know each other, how each other works, you know each other's strengths and weaknesses? Probably not, because the team's constantly changing and adapting. But again, I suppose that pretty comes down to as well whether you're a bit more of a lone wolf or a team player. And for some people, that won't be a problem. But I think an SDR role, you want to know your team, you want to know each other's weaknesses, so you can learn and essentially grow quicker. So yeah, good point. Good point. Well, you made a comment at the beginning of the webinar around if you haven't connected with me, you've probably seen me making some comments on LinkedIn on various posts. Just on that, I suppose segueing nicely into building a brand. From your perspective, I'm sure it's really changed drastically since you were first in sales, but nowadays, how important is it, even from the SDR level up, how important is it to now build a personal brand, in your opinion?
It's not as important as picking up the phone and dialing.
Facts.
It's just not.
Yeah.
I have changed my opinion on that over the last couple of years. There's too much noise on LinkedIn. There's too many opinions on LinkedIn. There is a lot of experts on LinkedIn that they're not experts. They're not. I spend quite a lot of my time speaking with sales leaders, and when certain names come up that happen to be very prevalent on LinkedIn, eyes roll. And so to any SDR looking to build a personal brand, I'm not saying don't do it. I have a personal brand. It's not as important as hitting your number.
Yeah.
I would be very cautious about, you know, the messages that you're putting out there. I'm not saying don't, but I would just urge caution. And ultimately what counts right now is your number. And the best SDRs I know that I still talk to, they don't post anymore. They get the job done. And so it's not to say don't do it. I wouldn't be prioritizing it right now. Not at all.
That's a good point. Do you think, depending on like sector, I suppose products that you're selling for some people actually could be very valuable, but actually probably in the majority of the business that you'd be joining as an SDR, maybe not so much then. Would you agree?
I think that's a very valid point. You know, choose your audience, and I think that's it's very good. You know, if you look at the guys that are big on social here, I think that, you know, don't forget they're selling sales tech or martech most likely.
Yeah.
So we're all very active. But I think even those brands, you know, I think if you go to some of the, like, I still think that actually it's not as effective as it once was. I think it has I think social selling will go down. I think we'll find a new way to social sell. I'm not saying it's dead, but yeah, I wouldn't put all my eggs into that basket right now. Would I add to it? Yeah. Do I think it's going to benefit? Yeah, potentially. I do, and I think you've got to figure out your audience. But if you really want to get to know your customer, do the research. Spend more time researching your customers. That will pay off more dividends than figuring out how many likes you're going to get.
Yeah, agreed. Last question, Will. I know we've got to shoot in a minute. What do you think is going to be the next wave of sales? Obviously, there's a lot of chat around ChatGPT and AI. Do you think that's really going to kick off?
Yes. It won't happen as fast or as we predict, and it might not necessarily happen in the same way, but the applications of AI are phenomenal, obviously. I really think where we're going to see what I'm seeing today, where there's absolute practical applications of AI, is in the research phase of the SDR process.
Yeah.
The ability to research, the ability to personalize emails with newsletters at a click of a button is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I'm advising AI SDR companies today, and they are. I was like, are you going to work as like a co-pilot to SDR? And their like mission is like, no, we're going to replace AI. Now, morally morally, I have my issues with that, especially when it comes to my passion for developing young people. But ultimately, I wouldn't not bet on it. I'm going to bet on the side of the technologists. I guess it's a question of when, not if. So yeah, I think they're the things that I would say will. I do think AI, to your point, to answer your question, AI is obviously going to have a massive impact on what we do, but I think we're going to see like 5 to 10 iterations of that before it really kicks in. I would advise anyone that saw that AI SDR thing coming out over the weekend to chill out. It's got a long way to go, but it doesn't mean to say that that won't change things, or it won't change things again. I think what will have to happen is, what will happen at one point is we'll get to a point where we get so used to conversing with AI and robots, it'll be like, give me a robot, not a human. I don't want to deal with your incompetence, right? At least, but that takes time for consumers to trust. I think it might go down that way, is what I'm seeing. It's like
Terminator. So it's happening. Give it 5 years, Will Koning says. No joke.
5 to 10 years, I think it will be a different world, for sure. I mean, it's a very different world than 5 years ago. Like 7 years ago, things like fanatical prospecting just came out, and that was such a new way where we sort of split between SDRs and AEs really take shape. Now look at us, right? It's really changed. So it does change, and this is definitely a new world.
Interesting. Well, on that bombshell of AI taking over the world, predicted by Will Koning, I think we'll end it there. Look, Will, you've been an absolute pleasure today. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge insight. Is there any lasting impressions or thoughts that you want to leave with us and the rest of the people who are going to be watching this?
Pick up the phone.
Pick up the phone. There we go. Cheers for watching, everyone. Cheers, Will. Bye.